Um, Klaus Bonnet, you are the chairman of the organization CRIM.
That's true.
Which is what organization?
Our purpose is to assist people who are convicted of a crime, prisoners, and we are also assisting persons who want legal aid in connection with complaints about the Danish police force, for example.
Right. What do you see as the biggest problem in the administration of criminal justice in this country?
We have quite a few things which differ from what you see in other countries. England, for example, is a so-called common law jurisdiction. One of the things we've got in Denmark is when persons are interviewed by the police, for example, and you get a police report. That police report is it can be used as evidence against a person in court. The Danish Supreme Court has ruled that even though no lawyer was present when the person was interviewed, it's still allowed to, as a rule of thumb, as a normal rule, to give that report as evidence in court. And that means very few persons are represented by a lawyer while interviewed in Denmark by the police, as opposed to Great Britain, for example, where you have a so-called duty lawyer, police station lawyer, present in virtually all police interviews. In Denmark, it's a very, very tiny proportion of persons who are interviewed by the police who has a lawyer present at all. And also the fact there's no proper legal aid system. If you are charged with a criminal offence in Denmark, the police will tell you that you are not that if you can have a lawyer present while you're interviewed by the police, but if you choose to have one, you're supposed to pay the lawyer's fee, which discourage people. People are likely to say, okay, though, I would prefer the interview without a lawyer. And then on top of that, when the report is completed, it can be held against you. It can be used as evidence in court, and very often is used as evidence in court, even though no lawyer was present. And even though, if the person claims that they were bamboozled or they were under pressure to to give a statement to the police, so that's a very different system.
Okay, but this practice has been deemed illegal by the European Court of Human Rights.
The European Court of Human Rights stated in a case back in 2008, the so-called Saldus versus Turkey case. In that case, they ruled that if a lawyer is not present, and if the person has not specifically asked not to have a lawyer present, then his statement given to the police cannot be used as evidence against him in court later on. And that differs considerably from the way criminal cases are carried out in Denmark.
Okay, so this ruling has not actually been implemented in Danish administration
in my opinion,
of justice.
That ruling is not followed in Denmark. The Danish Supreme Court, I think it's the High Court. One of the High Courts has ruled that although the person had no lawyer present while he was interviewed, and although the person was below the age of 18, and although the person, I'm not sure what he claimed, but that person, I think he made a confession to the police, as far as I remember. And they often do, people. They very often make a confession, and then a confession to the police, and then they retract the confession, and then that report is still held against them by the prosecution service, which I think is quite problematic. And it's interlinked with the lack of a proper legal aid system in Denmark, as they have in most other European countries. In other European countries, if your income is below a certain level, then you would be entitled to have legal representation paid for by the state, also in criminal cases. but that's not the case in Denmark. The state, the government does pay in the first place, but you are asked to reimburse a fee in case you are found guilty, in case you're convicted, and that discourages people from using a lawyer quite often. And that also means that in a huge number of cases, people are interviewed by the police without a lawyer is present.
Okay. You also mentioned another oddity, which I consider very important. It is regarding the use of juries.
Yeah, in England and Wales, for example, you're entitled to have a jury hearing if you're likely to be sentenced, if you're likely to get a custodial sentence of any more than 6 months. In Denmark, you have to. It's only if you're likely to get a custodial sentence, which is beyond 4 years of imprisonment. And if the case is about fraud, or if the case is about narcotic drugs, they are exempt, which is a huge number of cases. In those many cases, you're not allowed to have a jury at all.
Okay, so that is...
They're heard by a judge and 2 lay judges, so-called domsmandssag, which doesn't translate into English because it's a unique Danish institution.
Right. But that means that you have, to explain what it's about. It's
those. The
jury is reduced to 2 persons.
Yeah, exactly. You could argue that's a jury. Two persons are a jury, and then there's a professional judge. So 3 of them all together, and they adjudicate the case together. So in the English system, the jury only they only decide whether you're guilty or not. The conviction, they're the trial, if you like, the jury trial. Then if you're found guilty, then afterwards you're going to have a sentencing hearing, where it's the professional judge that decides what sentence you should have.
That meets out the punishment.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
To work out which punishment you should have to meet that out, so to speak, and that's what I see the risk, I think, in those specific type of Danish cases is that the 2 jury members they are supposed both to participate in the conviction itself and then afterwards in the sentencing. And normal lay persons do not know an awful lot about sentencing, so that means they are under a very big influence from the judge. Also, when it comes to decide whether the person is guilty or not.
The question of guilt.
Exactly.
But there's another difference as far as that issue is concerned, because in Denmark, the question of guilt is decided by a simple majority.
Not as simple. A quorum, a so-called 2/3. It would be in those cases we would talk about 1 judge and 2 lay judges. If 2/3, if 2 of the persons find you guilty, then you're convicted.
But if we have a jury of 12 people,
in an English jury.
Yeah.
If what you say, you normally say you have a hung jury if you do not agree, and so only in case that the full jury find you guilty, then you're convicted. So normally, if
jury has to be unanimous on the question of guilt.
That's it.
Yeah.
Apart from
but
one,
Denmark,
normally it's 1 jury member. It's a bit more tricky than that, because normally one jury member might be off the jury because of illness, whatever, because sometimes a case can go on for a very long time, and say 1 jury member falls ill, then you can still reach a conviction with 11 jurors. But in that case, it has to be unanimous.
Okay. Whereas in Denmark, if you have 12 jurors, it's decided by a simple majority.
I think no, you don't have 12 jurors. In the first instance court, you have 6 jurors, I think, and in the High Court, I think it's 9 jurors, I think.
All right.
And
the reason it's an odd number.
If the majority find you guilty,
yeah.
Then you're convicted.
But that's a very big difference.
It is quite a considerable difference, yeah.
What about the way that jurors are selected?
I'm not sure that I haven't been aware of any specific differences which I think are worth highlighting.
Well, it used to be so that jurors were drawn from the member lists of the political parties.
Yes, but I think in England it's the local councils who where they're picked out from, and I think even though if you're previously convicted and your conviction is more than 5 years old, then normally you will also be drawn as a juror, which is not the case in Denmark as far as I know. They're more restrictive as far as that goes.
All right. So what do you see as the biggest problems in the correctional system?
I think in many ways, at least historically, if you go back to the 70s, late 60s, 70s and 80s, Denmark has an extremely progressive criminal justice system, to the extent that very low sentences, high focus on suspended sentences. We used suspended sentences more than any other European country, and fairly short sentences compared to, say, England. So to that extent, I think it's quite positive, because it's proved time and again that punishment does not really deter people from crimes.
What deters people from crimes, in your view?
In my view, it depends on who you are. Persons with who have things to lose, they are more inclined to be susceptible via punishment, whereas people from a poor background, from a deprived background, they do not really bother about punishment, whatever kind of punishment you give them, because punishment doesn't lead you into, if you want to change such people, if you want to assist, it's more important to offer those persons access to education or access to better living conditions, if you want to keep them out of crime. And to that extent, I think the Danish system has gone further than many other countries. But over the past years, we have seen a change.
We've seen a reversal.
Yes, exactly. We've seen a more populist approach to our prison system. We use solitary confinement to a very large degree compared to many other systems.
I think we're the country in Europe that uses solitary confinement the most.
I'm not sure. It depends on how you. That could be debated, but we use it a lot, and we use it both as a means while you are remanded in custody, while your case is pending with the court. Then you use solitary confinement because you believe that to prevent people from influencing,
meddling with the investigation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, which is quite different from other countries, when people do serve a normal sentence, when they're actually found guilty and they serve the sentence, to a very large degree, solitary confinement is used as a punishment.
As a disciplinary...
Exactly. Or it's used as to prevent to prevent on disciplinary improper behavior from the prisoners. Right. And I think what is a big problem, the UN CAT committee, for example, they say if you are they recommend that persons who are kept in solitary confinement for more than 15 days should have a right to take the case to court, and that's not allowed Danish prisoners. They're not given that opportunity.
It's not even allowed psychiatric patients.
It depends on what.
Well, after the last changes in that law, you can have
the
to
Psychiatric Act.
Yeah, you can have. It can take up to 8 weeks before you can take your case before a judge.
I'm not sure what you think about, because
I'm thinking about people who are.
Are we talking about people who are sentenced to a hospital order, or are we talking about
they're not.
patients?
We're talking about normal psychiatric patients. If you're placed in a closed psychiatric ward, it may take up to 8 weeks before you can see a judge. If you protest the measure,
it could take any longer, because what they've got a system also in Danish psychiatric hospitals where you can take people to where they can be separated from the others in a segregation unit, or segregated on their own room, and there's actually no barrier there. They can do that for even longer than 8 weeks, but. We have a few test cases at the moment, in fact, where which might reverse that trend, because it could be in breach of the European Convention of Human Rights, Article 5. So that's why we are testing such 2 cases at the moment at the High Court.
All right, Claus Bonnet, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks yourself.
Thank you.
Pleasure.